All right, so diving into a world of wealth and power and, yeah, a whole lot of manipulation to try and answer the question. Grifter or gifted. Today, we're unpacking the enigma that is Ghislaine Maxwell.
Okay.
You've provided us with a mountain of information articles, court documents, even like expert psychological analyses from her trial, and we're going to see if we can piece together this puzzle.
Yeah.
Was she a mastermind pulling the strings, a pawn in a larger game, or somewhere in between?
Well, what strikes me right away is this fascinating paradox.
Okay.
Ghislaine Maxwell is born into extreme privilege,
Right.
daughter of a media tycoon rubbing elbows with the elite at Oxford, yet somehow ends up entangled in this dark, exploitative world. It really makes you wonder how much her environment shaped her trajectory.
Speaking of her environment, her father, Robert Maxwell, was quite the character himself.
Oh, yeah.
He owned the Mirror Group newspapers and was a controversial figure, to say the least. And his death found floating near his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, no less shrouded in accusations of massive financial fraud.
Wow.
That's a lot for anyone to process, let alone someone in their early 20s like Ghislaine was at the time.
It's absolutely a pivotal moment. Think about the timing. This dramatic downfall happens just before Ghislaine moves to the U.S. and becomes deeply involved with Jeffrey Epstein. It makes you wonder, did her father's legacy, the weight of that scandal, influence her choices?
It's definitely a piece of the puzzle. Okay, so let's talk about Epstein. The nature of their relationship is still so murky. Was it love, business, or something more sinister? A power dynamic built on exploitation. What do you make of it?
It's a question that continues to fascinate and perplex. We have accounts describing a romantic connection, while others point to a business partnership, and then there are those who believe it was a much darker situation, where manipulation and exploitation were at play. Adding another layer of perplexity, in 1995, Epstein names a new venture after her, the Ghislaine Corporation, based in Palm Beach, Florida.
A grand gesture of affection, or a calculated move? It's hard to say for sure, but at this point, they're both firmly entrenched in a world of wealth and influence. Let's not forget that in 2002, Donald Trump was quoted in a magazine interview describing Epstein as a terrific guy.
Yeah.
It really shows the circle they were moving in. And then, of course, there are Virginia Giuffre's allegations. She claims that Maxwell acted as a recruiter for Epstein, facilitating her abuse.
Giuffre's allegations are central to this story. She claims she was recruited at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach when she was only 16 and subjected to abuse at multiple Epstein residences. This was a key part of the case against Maxwell and really brought the dark underbelly of their relationship into sharp focus.
And speaking of the case, let's delve into the specific charges against Maxwell. From what I understand, she faced some very serious accusations.
That's right. Maxwell was charged with sex trafficking of minors, enticing minors to engage in illegal sex acts, and conspiracy. The prosecution really honed in on instances where Maxwell was directly involved, physically present, handling payments, or even allegedly participating in the abuse. This was crucial to their strategy of painting her as an active participant, not just a bystander.
And during the trial, the prosecution presented that infamous black book as evidence, right? The one with contact information for numerous young women listed under massages. It's a chilling detail.
Absolutely. That black book was a key piece of evidence. It painted a very disturbing picture of a potentially systematic approach to recruiting and exploiting young girls. The jurors also saw physical evidence like a folding massage table that was reportedly used by Epstein.
It's hard to imagine what those four accusers went through, having to testify and relive those traumatic experiences. One of them, Carolyn, was only 14 when she alleges Maxwell brought her into this world.
Their bravery is truly remarkable. Each accuser shared harrowing details about their alleged abuse by Epstein and Maxwell's purported role in recruiting and grooming them. They described a pyramid of abuse, as the prosecutors put it, with Maxwell allegedly at the top, manipulating these vulnerable young girls for Epstein's gratification.
It's incredibly disturbing, but the defense tried to counter these accounts, didn't they? Didn't they try to discredit the accusers' memories?
Yes, the defense called Elizabeth Loftus, a psychologist, as an expert witness. Her testimony focused on the fallibility of memory and the possibility of false memories being implanted. It's a tactic that's often used in these types of cases.
That raises an important question. In cases like this, how do we balance the need for due process with the imperative to believe and support those who come forward with allegations of abuse? Seems like a very delicate and complex issue.
It is. The defense also tried to position Maxwell as a scapegoat for Epstein, who is no longer alive to stand trial. They argued that she was being unfairly targeted and that her involvement was minimal. However, the prosecution countered this by emphasizing the specific instances where Maxwell was directly involved, as we discussed earlier. Ultimately, the jury deliberated for 5 full days before reaching a verdict.
5 days is a long time. It suggests they really grappled with the evidence and the different narratives presented. What was the outcome?
They found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty of 5 of the 6 counts against her.
Wow, that's a pretty decisive verdict. It seems like the jury believed the accusers and saw Maxwell as more than just a bystander.
It was a significant victory for the survivors and a powerful statement that even those in positions of immense privilege can be held accountable for their actions. However, despite the verdict, Maxwell's refusal to testify in her own defense left a lot of unanswered questions.
That silence is deafening, isn't it?
It is.
What do you think were the possible motivations for her silence? Was she protecting others, or was it simply a legal strategy to avoid incriminating herself further?
It's a question that has fueled endless speculation. Some believe she was shielding other powerful figures who might have been involved in the ring. Others think she was simply trying to minimize her own culpability. We may never know her true motivations, but her silence certainly adds another layer of complexity to this already intricate story.
And it speaks to the power dynamics at play, doesn't it? The fact that someone in her position might have felt compelled to protect others, even in the face of such serious charges, is quite telling.
It certainly is. It highlights the complexities of power, influence, and the potential for complicity in these types of situations. And it makes you wonder how deep this rabbit hole goes. Who else might have been involved?
Okay, before we go any further down that rabbit hole, let's shift our focus to Maxwell's life after the trial. Where is she now, and what's her current situation?
Maxwell is currently serving her 20-year sentence in a low-security federal women's prison in Tallahassee, Florida. The conditions there have been described as quite harsh, with the reports of sanitation issues, limited food options, and even rodent infestations. It's a far cry from the luxurious lifestyle she once enjoyed.
It's a stark contrast, to say the least. But even with her conviction and imprisonment, there's a sense of unfinished business. Maxwell is appealing her sentence, claiming she should have been protected by immunity provisions. What exactly does that mean?
Well, her legal team is arguing that a previous non-prosecution agreement in Florida related to Epstein's earlier charges should have shielded her from prosecution. Essentially, they're claiming she was implicitly granted immunity through that agreement.
It's a complex legal argument. But regardless of the appeal's outcome, it doesn't change the fact that she was found guilty or the impact of her actions on the survivors. What insights can you offer into their experiences and how their lives have been affected?
You're right. The legal proceedings are just one part of this story. The lasting impact on the survivors is immeasurable. Many of them have spoken about the profound trauma they endured and the ongoing challenges they face. Emotional distress, difficulty with relationships, and the constant struggle to rebuild their lives.
It's a stark reminder that while the wheels of justice may turn slowly, the scars of abuse can last a lifetime. This case also brought Prince Andrew, Duke of York, under scrutiny. Virginia Giuffre alleged she was trafficked to him by Epstein. He wasn't charged, but his reputation took a major hit.
Absolutely. The allegations against Prince Andrew, though never proven in court, further demonstrate the far-reaching network Epstein and Maxwell cultivated. Jeffrey's name was mentioned almost 250 times in Maxwell's trial, and photos of her as a teenager were shown to the jury. Her story is deeply intertwined with this whole saga.
It's almost like a spider web, with threads connecting to various high-profile figures and institutions. It begs the question, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Are there other individuals who should be held accountable?
That's the question that lingers, even after Maxwell's conviction. The trial may be over, but the pursuit of justice for all those affected is far from finished. The possibility of further charges against other Epstein employees or associates is still very much on the table.
That's a crucial point. The focus shouldn't shift solely to the powerful figures potentially involved. We need to keep the attention on those who are directly harmed. Speaking of those in Epstein and Maxwell's orbit, the Miami Herald played a critical role in bringing their crimes back into the spotlight in 2018. Investigative journalism was key in reigniting the investigation that ultimately led to Maxwell's arrest.
Couldn't agree more. The Herald's relentless reporting exposed the sweetheart deal Epstein received back in 2008 and revealed the true extent of his alleged crimes. It was a pivotal moment that breathed new life into the case and gave a voice to the victims. It's a testament to the power of investigative journalism and holding those in power accountable.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of a free press in a functioning democracy. Now, circling back to the trial itself, there's one aspect we haven't touched on yet: The defense brought in an expert witness, a psychologist, to testify about the fallibility of memory. That seems like a risky strategy. What was their goal in doing that?
The defense was attempting to raise doubts about the accuser's memories, suggesting that their recollections might be inaccurate or influenced by external factors. They were essentially trying to undermine the credibility of their testimony.
So rather than directly refuting the accusations, they aimed to sow seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds.
Precisely. It's a tactic that's often used in cases where there isn't strong physical evidence. By calling into question the reliability of the victim's memories, the defense hoped to create enough reasonable doubt to secure an acquittal for Maxwell. However, this strategy ultimately failed, as the jury found the accuser's testimonies credible and convincing.
It's a reminder that while legal strategies can be complex and multifaceted, ultimately, it's the jury's perception of the evidence and the witnesses that determines the outcome. It also highlights the importance of carefully selecting expert witnesses and ensuring that their testimony is sound and credible.
Absolutely. The use of expert testimony can be a powerful tool in legal proceedings, but it needs to be handled strategically and ethically. In this case, the prosecution effectively countered the defense's expert by presenting a cohesive narrative and emphasizing specific instances where Maxwell was directly involved, corroborating the accuser's accounts.
So in a way, the prosecution was able to neutralize the impact of the defense's expert by focusing on the tangible evidence and the consistency of the victim's stories.
Exactly. They highlighted the fact that the accuser's accounts aligned on key details despite the defense's attempts to portray their memories as unreliable. This helped to solidify the prosecution's case and ultimately led to Maxwell's conviction.
It's a fascinating example of how different legal strategies can clash in the courtroom, with the jury ultimately acting as the arbiter of truth. It underscores the importance of a fair and impartial judicial system where both sides have the opportunity to present their arguments and the evidence is weighed carefully before a verdict is reached.
I couldn't agree more. The Ghislaine Maxwell trial serves as a potent reminder that justice is a complex and often arduous process. It also highlights the vital role of the jury in our legal system, entrusting ordinary citizens with the weighty responsibility of determining guilt or innocence.
And it underscores the need for ongoing vigilance in holding those in power accountable, no matter their wealth, status, or connections. Now, as we approach the end of our deep dive, let's take a step back and consider the bigger picture. What are the key takeaways from this complex and disturbing story? What does it tell us about our society, about power, and about the pursuit of justice?
On a societal level, the Ghislaine Maxwell case exposes the dark underbelly of wealth and privilege, revealing how those with vast resources can exploit and manipulate others for their own gain. It also highlights the systemic failures that allowed this abuse to continue for so long, pointing to a need for greater accountability and oversight.
It's a sobering reminder that power, if left unchecked, can corrupt, and that those in positions of authority have a responsibility to use their influence for good, not for personal gain or to shield themselves from accountability.
Precisely. The case also underscores the importance of believing and supporting survivors of abuse, particularly when they come forward against powerful individuals. Too often, their voices are silenced or dismissed, and their experiences minimized or disbelieved.
You're right. The courage of the survivors in this case is truly remarkable. They stood up, shared their stories, and faced their abuser in court, despite the immense pressure and scrutiny they faced. Their actions paved the way for justice to be served and sent a powerful message that even the wealthy and well-connected can be held accountable for their crimes.
Absolutely. Their bravery is an inspiration to us all, and their stories remind us that even in the face of immense power and adversity, truth and justice can prevail. However, it's also essential to acknowledge that the fight is far from over.
There are still so many unanswered questions, potential accomplices who haven't been brought to justice, and systemic issues that need to be addressed to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again.
You've hit the nail on the head. The Ghislaine Maxwell case, while significant, is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. It exposes a systemic problem, a culture that often protects the powerful and silences the vulnerable. We need to continue to shine a light on these issues, to demand accountability, and to work towards creating a society where this kind of exploitation is simply not tolerated.
And part of that is changing the conversation, right?
Yeah.
We need to move beyond simply reacting to these scandals and start proactively addressing the root causes. How do we create a culture that empowers victims to come forward and ensures that their voices are heard and believed?
It's a crucial question. I think it starts with education. We need to teach young people about healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent. We need to create environments where they feel safe to speak up if they've experienced abuse or exploitation. And we need to provide resources and support for survivors, ensuring they have access to counseling, legal aid, and other essential services.
It's also about shifting societal attitudes, isn't it? We need to move away from victim blaming and create a culture where survivors feel supported and empowered to seek justice.
Absolutely. We need to challenge the myths and stereotypes that surround sexual abuse and exploitation. We need to understand the power dynamics at play and recognize that those in positions of authority often use their influence to manipulate and control others. And we need to hold perpetrators accountable, regardless of their wealth, status, or connections.
It's a multifaceted challenge, and it requires a collective effort from individuals, institutions, and society as a whole. But I think there's reason for hope. The fact that we're having these conversations, that the Ghislaine Maxwell case has garnered so much attention, that survivors are finding their voices and demanding justice, these are all signs of progress.
I agree. We're seeing a shift in the culture, a growing awareness of these issues, and a willingness to confront them. It's a long and difficult journey, but I believe we're moving in the right direction.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the life and crimes of Ghislaine Maxwell, I'm left with a mix of emotions. There's a sense of relief that justice was served, but also a profound sadness for the victims and a recognition of the immense work that still needs to be done to prevent this from happening again.
I share those sentiments. This case serves as a powerful reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil, of the devastating consequences of unchecked power, and of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity.
It's also a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a safer, more just world. Whether it's educating ourselves and others about these issues, supporting organizations that work with survivors, or simply speaking up when we see injustice, we can all make a difference.
And that's perhaps the most important takeaway from this deep dive. The Ghislaine Maxwell case is not just a story about one woman's crimes. It's a story about power, abuse, and the fight for justice. It's a story that challenges us to examine our own beliefs, our own complicity, and our own responsibility to create a better world.
Thank you for guiding us through this complex and challenging topic. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked some important conversations and inspired you to take action. Remember, even small acts of courage and compassion can have a ripple effect, creating positive change in our communities and in the world.